Okay, great, great.
Lost touch with the other, other aspect of public health, dental public health.
Great.
Nice. All right. Okay.
Still time. Denzi, I'll be back in 2 minutes. Is that all right?
Yeah. So, Farheen, can you hear me now? Sorry for that technical glitch, I guess.
Yeah. So there's 3 minutes more.
Yeah, I think we'll just wait for a couple of minutes and then we're good to go. Okay, so how's everything there, Farheen, in terms of the COVID situation?
It's pretty much controlled here. It's fine. I mean, we've been vaccinated and I was infected with COVID a year back. So all that is, yeah.
That's...
When do the participants start coming in? By 3?
Yeah. It's usually...
I mean, sorry, 6.
About post 6 o'clock, yeah, I think 5 or 10 minutes, we would be logged in. We have someone called Farah. Is that from your side?
Yes, she is my principal.
Oh, nice.
I studied here in Saudi.
Oh,
so
okay.
The Indian school.
That's good. Hello, Farah ma'am, I think.
Hello, it's very nice to be part of this. Very proud to see our one of our students presenting something. Really happy to be part of it.
Thank you, ma'am.
All the best, Farheen.
Thank you.
Sweet. Okay, so I think I've just put this on. Let's check if it's streaming on YouTube. I guess it is. Yeah. Okay. Great. So, how was your experience, Farheen? Like, especially with the recent exam which you completed, right? How was the curriculum and everything in terms of the diploma in dental public health? What exactly were you tested on?
I was lucky that I could do it online because it's usually I have to go to the UK and do it. But because of the pandemic since 2020, last year and this year, they conducted it online. Okay. So it was theory and practical. We had 2 theory papers and we had 1 practical. Practical was basically clinical structured reasoning. So they'd give us 4 scenarios, 4 different examiners on Office. What do you call that app? Not Zoom, the other one.
Got it.
Yeah. So we had 4 cases and these cases would be discussed by 4 different examiners. First one was on ethics and fluorides, water fluoridation.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. And then it was a newspaper clipping and they would, ask questions on it. So yeah, it was pretty much similar to the Saudi dental licensing exam, which I gave. That was completely interview based scenarios. And so the practical part was similar to that, but the theory was pretty vast. We had 2 papers and they covered everything.
How was it going back to writing those theory papers?
It was more difficult because it was typing. So we are so used to writing that, typing is, but yeah, it's a good thing that our specialty, we do research and we do, writing, but yeah. So it was 2 hours and they would show the countdown and, every now and then I would just look at the countdown and keep typing.
Okay. So any plans of coming back here or are you going to be based there?
Not at the moment.
at the
I
moment?
don't know how, yeah. Currently, no.
We have one of our alumni, Dr. Mamta Hebbal, ma'am. She's, I think, working in the All Women's University in Saudi. I think Riyadh, I'm not sure.
Okay.
She's there for about, quite a senior professor. I think Susan ma'am would be knowing, Mamta Hebbal, ma'am. She's been there for about 8 or 10 years now.
Yeah, I know her. Yeah,
You
I
know
know
her, right,
her.
ma'am?
But I was not aware she has gone to Saudi.
She's in Saudi, ma'am, for quite some time. Almost, it's been 5 years she's joined the university. I think the King Saud University or the All Women's University, which is there.
All women university. I don't think medical universities, we don't have any. Maybe previously it was all women.
Okay.
Now there are no more medical universities. There are arts and science. I mean, arts and humanities, such universities. But medical.
She was telling me about the way the curriculum is designed, and a lot of impetus in the undergraduate syllabus for dental students is community centered in terms of credit points and all of that. So that was really good to know, and getting to know the perspective there. And I mean, of course, they do take community dentistry pretty seriously, and it's actually in practice, and preventive dentistry essential part of it. More into thing. What we're looking at, I think Susan knows, what we're looking at is curricular reforms in India as well. We've been fortunate to have started this off at our association now. There is a core team which is working in competency-based curriculum. Dr. Vamshi sir, again, has put in board Dr. Naveen sir, and I think even Pushpanjali ma'am is heading the committee. Okay. So it's to evolve the competency-based curriculum criteria so that they suit international standards, and medical profession, it's sort of getting like a reboot here. Okay. So something to be proud of that is happening from our specialty. Somewhere I think we're taking the leap forward and look at the dentistry situation in India. So that's a little update from home. Okay, great. So
I'm very much in touch with Dr. Chandrasekhar, Dr. Venkatachalam, Dr. Joseph. So we have our group, Amrita group, and
Amrita group, right? Yeah. I had the fortune of speaking to Chandrasekhar sir, was on our Teachers' Day special webinar last year.
Yeah, so, I think he gave a talk that
time. Spoke extensively about various opportunities, his experiences at the residency program in DPH back in the States, and how much of public health in dentistry, or the way we put it, right? And again, sir happens to be an alumni of BDCH, right? So I was just looking up his past presentations and all that, and then it sort of gave a lot of nostalgia back there. In fact, recently we had the international webinar. No, I think Dr. Cohen had presented that. So he happened to co-author a couple of papers back when he was in the States. So he'd only look up on one of those textbooks which is lying in a library. He said 20 years ago, I remember reading that during my PG, and the social sciences and I think disease promotion, oral health promotion textbook. So one of the authors being Cohen herself.
Even now, Dr. Habib Benzian is giving a talk, I think, in a few days.
I think the next one is the series which is coming up. Great. All right, Farheen, I think we'll just check on the participants. I think we do have a lot of people joining in. I'd also like to put it across that today's session is brought in collaboration with IDA Davangere branch. In fact, we have with us here Dr. Pramod G.V. sir. I'm just asked to come on board. The Honorable Secretary of IDA Davangere, and also I extend my gratitude to Dr. Meeta Harishmam, who's the President of IDA Davangere, and everybody here. Yeah, good evening, Pramod sir. If we can see you, just a minute. Just put the gallery. Yeah, can you please unmute yourself, sir? Yeah, good evening, Pramod sir.
Yeah, Denzi. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. So your opening thoughts, sir, for today's session, and for all the dental practitioners and students at IDA Davangere, the relevance of our topic. I think some opening thoughts from you, sir.
Denzi, I'm looking for to collect a lot of information. I've been as a editor to some journal, some reputed journal there. I've been in this scientific writing from last 6-7 years. I've been published some articles in state, national, as well as PubMed Index journals. Okay, but I see some articles which will come for review. Nowadays, some UG students are also doing research and they don't know how to write or publish their work. So in my IDA Davangere branch, also some interns are there who have completed their UG research, and they are also willing for scientific writing. So I think this platform will help all the interns and all the students, UG students, to know about the scientific writing, how to use a precise words clearly and cleanly, write the logical communication with all the researchers. So what is basically, how it is different from regular writing, how the scientific writing is different from regular writing. So I think some of my students are going to learn with this, and all the practitioners also are going to learn new things in that. So I look forward to see some new ideas, and it will be, I think it is mainly for our students, which I want actually.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your opening thoughts on that. Okay. Okay, so I think, thank you, Pramod sir, for the opening address.
Thank
about
you.
the relevance of the topic, which is about to follow. Good evening, everyone. Once again, welcome back to PhD 101, Wisdom Wednesdays, as we like to call it. The sessions in collaboration with IDA Davangere branch. Presenting all of you all a session on scientific writing. Our guest speaker for today, I'd just like to take a minute and introduce Dr. Farheen Taha to the panel. Again, to begin with, Dr. Farheen is completed recently. She, after having completed a Master's of Dental Surgery in Public Health Dentistry from Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham University in the year 2016, she recently completed a Diploma in Dental Public Health from the Royal College of Surgeons of England. She has done a BDS from Yenapoya Dental College affiliated to RGHS. Her main research and special interest lies in non-communicable disease epidemiology, health disparities, and various studies on equity in healthcare, population-level interventions, and behavioral epidemiology. She has received several hours of continuing education on various aspects of dentistry with special emphasis on research, biostatistics, and tobacco cessation. She's also done community studies on community tobacco usage and habit evaluation of tribal population, has got various presentations in national and international podiums, and again, a pre-number of publications, closely works with the inner workings of public health and dental public health. Again, immensely happy for having accepted our invitation for him to come on board and do this for us. In fact, she is presently working as an oral health columnist at a Saudi-based online magazine called Pathways. And she's also a part-time writer at Al Bilad Daily, the online edition. Also does freelance content writing for various scientific publications. In fact, recently, she also has been the guest faculty for the research methodology workshop conducted in the virtual mode at Amrita School of Dentistry, and a workshop on introduction to public health at the Sri Mookambika Dental College, Trivandrum. So thank you so much, Farheen, for taking out time, connecting with us all the way from Saudi there. Thank you so much for taking this platform, and hopefully I'm sure the students and everybody who's joining us here, it's a mixed bag of postgraduates, undergraduates, and there's a couple of teachers as well. So all of us looking forward to your session. With that brief introduction, welcome again, Dr. Farheen, to the panel. I think you might take over now, Farheen.
Thank you, Dr. Denzi, for the very warm welcome. And also, I would like to extend my hearty welcome to all the participants. So this is a pet topic of mine. This is something that I'm very interested in. I think I'm not able to move the slide. Sorry. Is there a lag?
Yeah, you can just stop share and do that again. Not a problem.
Okay. Should I reshare?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Yeah. So this topic is a pet topic of mine. I'm very much interested in scientific writing. I do that for a living. And I have set certain goals for myself for this session. I'm hoping by the end of this session, I'm able to help you reading, and hopefully I will alleviate some or ease some of the fears that you have with regard to scientific writing. So let's begin with the question, what makes good writing? When you hear writing or good writing, what comes to your mind? Usually when we say good writing, or in writing specifically in scientific writing, the whole concept is that you are trying to put across your idea, or you're trying to communicate your idea in a clear and effective way. That is the whole core concept of scientific writing. And there are other aspects to scientific writing, like beauty, making your writing beautiful, making your writing elegant, making your writing stylish, but these come later. So in today's session, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to make sure you concentrate on trying to get your idea across clearly and effectively, and elegance, beauty, and style will take the backseat. Elegant style, like I mentioned, it is important. It's not that elegant style and beauty is not important when you do a scientific writing or a manuscript, but you should also know that initially when you write, in order to write something, the only thing that you need is you need to have an idea. You need to have a passion that you want to put across. And it is in the later stages that you try to, it's in the revision process, etc., that where elegance, style, and beauty, etc., comes in. When you read a magazine or a nice, well-written novel, you see how beautiful and elegant it looks. But trust me, it did not look that way in the first draft. It is in the later stages. In fact, it goes through the hands of multiple editors before it looks the way you read it. So it is really important for you to know that. Before I move further, let me tell you something. A lot of us scientists, especially researchers, we are people of science, right? So we have this feeling that we are not good writers. In order to be a good writer, you have to have some exposure in humanities, or you have to have some exposure, you have to major in the language English, etc. But if somebody has told you that writing is genetic or writing is inborn, it's a talent that can't be acquired, they are completely wrong. Writing is something that can be learned. For instance, it's like any other skill, like driving or swimming or even cooking. The more you do, the more better you get at it. So first of all, before I proceed further, I would like to tell all the participants here, I don't know the number of participants, but all the odd 22 participants, that everybody is a writer. Everybody can become good writers. It just needs some practice. And by practice, what I mean is you have to read. You have to be a voracious reader. So I have a homework for you. Once the session ends, you have to go back and read. And by read, I don't mean only scientific manuscripts or journals. You can read a high quality magazine or a novel, whatever it takes, whatever perks your interest. So I would suggest every day you make it a point to read at least 2 pages of good quality English literature, of good quality writing. And that will help you, that will go a long way in improving your writing skills. And also another tip I would like to give you is talk in English. Talk a lot, try to talk in English with your colleagues, with your students, or do not stick to your regional language. Another tip I would, and which is actually a common mistake that we do as people of science, is we have an idea, we have a research that's done, and before we open the Word document and we decide to write, we form the sentences in our own language, because for most of us, English is not our primary language. English is not our mother tongue. So many people, what they do is they form the sentences, they try to speak it out in their own, be it Hindi or Malayalam or Arabic or Urdu, whatever. So they try to speak it out in their own, or they form the sentences in their own language and they try to translate that. That is a very common mistake people do, and which is completely wrong. When you are deciding to write something, it is important that you form the sentences, you formulate the plot in English itself. And finally, the take-home message is good writing can be learned. So over the course of this session, hopefully we can improve your writing skills a little better. Scientific writing is a technical form of writing that is designed to communicate scientific information to other scientists. So that is just a definition I came across on scientific writing. Scientific writing, and you might think, what is the difference between medical writing? So you can imagine 2 circles. The bigger circle is scientific writing and the inner circle is medical writing. Scientific writing can pertain to any form of writing in science. It can be chemistry, physics, biology, anything. But medical writing is the writing when you do in relation to health and medicine. So here I think, I'm sure all of us, people of science, the form of writing we have to think about is medical writing. So in this session, I'm going to briefly touch upon grammar. I'm not going to take a whole session on grammar because that would warrant a whole, whole day or whole another session on grammar. But then today we are going to touch and go on grammar. Then we are going to look at the steps in writing a research manuscript. Very briefly, I'm going to touch upon plagiarism, authorship, and the submission process. So grammar. Grammar is really important. Grammar, how good your writing is or how people are going to understand your writing depends a lot on the grammar that you use. You do research, you have this fail-safe design, you have conducted this amazing study, you have a huge study population, you've collected the data well, you've done a very good statistical analysis. But when you don't write it well, the whole point, the whole plot is gone. Because why do we do research? Why do we do research? So that we can put our ideas or our findings across to other researchers, policymakers, and even the lay public. So when you're not able to put it across in a good way, the whole point of going through all that trouble of doing the research and doing the statistical analysis, etc., just goes out the window. So I think you should, other than this, you should try to get hold of some, by the end of this session, I am going to share some material. I'm going to give you names of I'm going to suggest some books or material that you can read up further for good writing. So there are some units in these books which specifically is denoted to grammar, and you can check that out. In this session, very briefly, I'll give you an overview of a few important, some of the important concepts in grammar. So active voice. It is very important that in scientific writing, you have to use the active voice when you present your paper. We will go a little we'll go a little further on active voice in the next slide. And also, it's really important that you cut the clutter and unnecessary words. I will give a short note on repetition and personal pronouns. What are personal pronouns, and should you avoid them or should you keep them? We'll have a look. So first, I'll tell you what active voice is. Active voice is something, it's kind of a voice where you have the agent, you have the subject, and then very closely it's followed by the verb, and then you have the object. For example, look at the first sentence here. She throws the ball. She is a subject, the agent, she's the one throwing it, and throws is the verb, and ball is the object, ball is being thrown. John will drive the car. The president made mistakes. So these are fairly simple, right? Simple sentences. Now look how it is when you write it in the passive form. The ball is thrown by her. The car will be driven by John. Mistakes were made by the president. So you can see that it's more wordy, and there is, the sentence looks much simpler when it was in the active form. One point I'm going to keep stressing every so often is you have to remember that you have to make life easier for your reader. A lot of people, when they think of scientific writing, their ego comes in the way, or they feel that as doctors, as researchers, we have to sound a certain way. We have to come across as really smart people. We have to throw in, words that are unheard of, and we have an objective presentation of writing, etc. But that is completely wrong. The whole concept of writing, if a good piece of writing draws the reader in. So in order to draw the reader in, you have to write it simply. And a very good way to do that is if you try to put across your points in active voice. Now look at this sentence. This is another example. My first visit to India will always be remembered by me. This is in passive form. Look where the verb is, the agent, recipient, it's all mixed up. Now look at the active form. I will always remember my first visit to India. So these examples I'm giving you just to show you what the difference is, how wordy the passive form becomes, and how these are very simple example sentences. But when you put this in scientific writing, in the journals that we come across, you can see the difference. So I remember as postgraduate student, initially when I started off reading, or when I was reading manuscripts, and I'm sure a lot of you have had this experience where you read a manuscript and you feel like it doesn't make sense, or you're not really able to understand it. And I used to keep thinking that maybe research is not my calling. Why am I not able to understand it? Why am I finding it boring? Why do I not feel like reading further? But now when I think back, it is also the way they've written the paper. The way the people write the paper makes a lot of difference in the way you understand the paper. So very important tip is try to stick to active voice, active form of writing, and try to make life simpler and easier for your reader. Declutter. You should not have too many words. We Indians, especially, we have this convoluted way of speaking, where something that can be spoken in a few words, we try to speak it in like 100 words. We try to stretch sentences and we try to beat around the bush, etc. That's a very that's something that you should try to avoid. It's always small is more. Keep remembering that. I'm going to read out something, and I would suggest you listen to it carefully. The secret to good writing is to strip every sentence to its cleanest components. Every word that serves no function, every long word that could be a short word, every adverb that carries the same meaning that's already in the verb, every passive construction that leaves a reader unsure of who is doing what. These are the 1001 adulterants that weaken the strength of a sentence. So you can understand from this that this is given by William Zinsser in On Writing Well, 1976. It's a very important paragraph where he has stressed explicitly on decluttering or reducing the words. I remember when I started writing as a postgraduate student, there were these specific sentences or words that you really like, and you want to keep it in your paper. And I remember every time my professor would ask me to cut short or cut it down, I would keep thinking that, oh, that sentence is so good. You know, I would like to keep it. Why would I want to delete it, or why would I want to remove it? So you have to remove this notion. Do not get too attached to your writing. You should be able to cut explicitly. You should savagely be able to declutter and cut your sentences. This is an example where we can look at removing clutter. Look at a sentence. Clinical seizures have been estimated to occur in 0.5% to 2.3% of the neonatal population. At first glance, the sentence looks all right, but this is too wordy. You may not realize it now, but I'll show you the cut version of it and you'll understand the difference. So what can we cut here? Clinical seizures have been, suppose we remove have been estimated. Why would we say have been estimated? Because it's obvious. Clinical seizures occur in 0.5%. Right? You can do without have been estimated. And then you see the sentence in 0.5% to 2.3% of the neonatal population. Suppose we replace neonatal population with neonates. Now look at the sentence. Clinical seizures occur in 0.5% to 2.3% of the neonates. That looks much better. It looks less wordy and it looks cleaner, right? So this is just a very small example where you know how removing clutter goes a long way in improving how your paper looks like. Moving on, let's talk about acronyms and repetition of words now. You can use acronyms in your paper, but stick to acronyms that are known everywhere, like WHO, DNA, RNA. So these are the acronyms that are known. Don't try to make your own acronyms. That is a complete no. Do not invent your own acronyms in the paper. So a lot of times what people do is initially they cook up an acronym for a word and then they expand it and write it initially. And then throughout the paper, they keep repeating the acronym form which they have created. That is a very wrong practice, because a lot of times it's not necessary that people start reading your paper from the introduction. Maybe somebody wants to look only at your results, or somebody they want to look only at the discussion. At that time, they'll have to go back and search what this acronym you have created actually means. So do not create your own acronyms, and do not feel shy to repeat words. A lot of times, a lot of researchers, they want to sound a certain way, they want to sound objective. So they feel that if I keep repeating the same word again and again, it doesn't look very good. I mean, I don't come across as very smart in my paper. That is, again, a very wrong notion, because key variables or keywords in the paper, it has to be repeated throughout the paper. There's nothing wrong in repeating your variables. I'll give you an example. Suppose you're doing a study and you're comparing two groups. The groups are obese group and lean group. So initially, the author keeps talking about obese group and keeps comparing the obese group and the lean group. And towards the later stages or end of the paper, suppose the author starts talking about the obese group as a heavy group, and the lean group is replaced by the thin group, etc. So this puts the reader off. The reader might wonder if it's a whole different group altogether, or some changes have been made in the initial group. So this kind of creates a lot of confusion. So there is no problem with repeating words. You have to repeat the words when needed. For your sort of fun, I want to show you some words, and these are not made up. This is true, because this was published in the Time magazine in 1953 and then again in 2012. And these have been taken from actual scientific journals where people have done this. For instance, there was a study on fruits, and apparently banana was the key variable in the study. So initially the authors used the word banana, and towards the later stages, they started replacing banana with the elongated yellow fruit. And for another study where mustache had to be mentioned, they said under nose hair crops, milk from cow as vitamin-laden liquid from a bovine milk factory. I mean, can you believe it? So these are real life examples where people have gone out of their way in order to not repeat words. When talking about acronyms, I'll give you an example where I came across a paper where they're talking about microRNA. So microRNA, RNA is an acronym in the first place. So initially, the authors kept saying microRNA. And later stages, I saw that they kept mentioning as miRNA. They made an acronym of an acronym. So that is complete wrong practice. It just doesn't make sense. How do you make an acronym of an acronym? So I would like to stress on this point that do not try to make your own acronyms, and do not shy away from repeating keywords. Okay, now this is another issue that a lot of us face, and I used to face this even during my postgraduate days, where do I have to avoid personal pronouns? Like, how do I start every sentence with we or I? But I would like to tell you that there is nothing wrong in avoiding personal pronouns. In fact, you are encouraged to use personal pronouns. If you remember, I kept talking about active form of writing. You should not write in the passive form, you should write in the active form. In order to write in the active form, you have to use personal pronouns a lot of times. So when you are not trying to use, because people feel that if I use a personal pronoun, I remove the objectivity to the paper. That doesn't make sense, because you and your team, you have made the study design, you have conducted the research, and you have done the analysis, and you have gotten the results, why wouldn't you take up responsibility for your own work, right? Because it's yours. So there's nothing wrong in, using personal pronouns and use we and I. You can own up to your own research. In fact, you should own up to your own research work. Another reason I could give you is many journals, especially it's explicitly mentioned in a lot of journals where you must have read the instruction to authors. In that section, they would talk about they would specifically ask you to use active form of writing. A very good example is the Science magazine. It's a very high impact factor magazine, and they ask the authors to use active form. And even if these examples don't suffice, I'll give you a very good example. So there was this paper by Watson and Crick. Now, Watson and Crick might ring a bell. Yes, they are the people who put forth the structure of the deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA. So they had put forth this much celebrated paper by Watson and Crick. It was published in Nature. And that paper started with, we suggest a structure to the salt of deoxyribonucleic acid. So they started their paper with we. So that's just an example. And so that's just an example to stress on the fact that you can very well, and you should very well use personal pronouns in your paper. So that was a few steps I had on grammar. There are more. You can, especially the use of punctuations, like you can literally use the punctuations like colon, semicolon, commas, parenthesis, dash. It does not get its due in writing, actually, because there's a lot of myth around writing that this shouldn't be done, that shouldn't be done. And people believe that, using punctuation is frowned upon, but that is, again, a wrong notion. You can use punctuation where necessary. Now we move on to the steps in writing process. Writing is basically, now we are going to increase our focus onto scientific writing. The earlier slides when I'm talking about grammar, it was more or less about all forms of writing. So further slides, I'm going to go a little more deeper into scientific writing. In scientific writing, the three most common steps followed are, you have the pre-writing phase. I would call them as the three phases. Then you have writing the first draft phase, and then you have the revision phase. So this is where a lot of people make mistakes. What people normally do is, when there is a manuscript at hand, when there is a manuscript that you need to make, they straight away go into the writing, the first draft phase. They take the Word document and they think they have to start writing. That is completely wrong. So here I'm going to explain further on the three phases of writing. And by writing a manuscript, what I mean is you have already completed your research. If you have been doing otherwise, if you start writing even before you've done the study, that is wrong practice. Writing, ideally, when I talk about writing, it is after you've collected the data, you've done the statistical analysis, and you have your result at hand. That is when you start writing your manuscript. So what is the pre-writing phase? In pre-writing phase, you collect, synthesize, and organize information. You read everything pertaining to the topic that you get your hands on. You keep reading, and then you should brainstorm, you should discuss your ideas with people. You can work out ideas away from the computer. Pre-writing phase is not sitting in front of the computer and reading article after the other. I don't mean only that. Even when you're doing mundane chores, like when you're driving or you're at the gym or you're cooking or doing something around the house, you can constantly think about the plot, about the story you want to tell, how you want to tie it up nicely. So you have to keep brainstorming every now and then before you sit down to actually write. You have to have a clear roadmap or an outline of what you are going to put into your writing. When you brainstorm, a very quick tip I can give you is it is very important that you discuss it with people. And when I say discuss it, it need not be people who are your colleagues or people in your same specialty. It can be anyone. You can keep discussing with people who will understand. For instance, when I have a study, when I have an idea for a study, or I have something to write, even during my postgraduate days, I would discuss the topic with my husband. He's also a doctor, but he is not a dentist. So it's nice to get the view of people who are not in your exact same field. And it's interesting to hear their take on it. So it's easily identifiable if some flaws are there in your plan. It's easy for people who are not exactly into your specialty to understand the flaws, etc. And it helps. It goes a long way in giving more clarity to your plan. And then once you get all the information that you need, there are different ways people have their own different ways of working. So what I do is I have the app, all of us have the app called Notes in our phone. So whenever I think of some bullets or points, I jot it down in the notes section. Sometimes what I do is I read up things online regarding, pertaining to the research, and I take a Word document and whatever I feel it's important, I paste it into the Word document and keep it. And that page can go on for, it can go on for pages. And sometimes I may take all of them, or sometimes, most of the times, I don't end up taking all of the information. But it's good that I formulate this plan and I keep noting it down somewhere. So that is your pre-writing phase. You have to concentrate a lot in the pre-writing phase. You have to have a clear mind, clear head, and delve, deep into reading. The second phase is writing the first draft. Most people find this stage the toughest, and it is this phase that, makes people scared of writing. But the reason you're scared of writing is because you're going about in the wrong way, because people usually start with writing the first draft, and that is where everything goes wrong. So if you follow the pre-writing phase, where you have a clear idea of what you're going to say and you have everything armed, you have all your information with you, your writing phase becomes very easy. Now, what happens is, a lot of times, and it has happened to me, initially when I was unsure, I would start with the writing phase. I would write the first sentence. And sometimes when I reach the second sentence, there is a statistic that I need. So what we end up doing is we start taking PubMed and we search for that specific statistic that we need. And then we don't find it on PubMed. So we go back to Google and then we start Googling it out. And then you get the PDF. And many a times it's not there in the abstract. And then you end up reading the entire PDF. So you lose a good 20 to 30 minutes. And while you're toggling between Google and PubMed, suddenly you think, oh, I might as well go to Amazon and order, these things which I kept for later. Or you might end up going to Facebook or Instagram, etc. And you lose track and you lose the plot of what you are trying to do. So that is another reason why going straight into the second phase, writing the first draft, is not ideal. The third phase is the revision phase. Remember, we spoke about style, beauty, and elegance. So it is in this phase that you try to make your writing look beautiful, elegant, and good. So revision is really important. Revision phase is what makes or breaks a paper, because when you're writing the first draft, you are just jotting down whatever the thoughts and everything, and before you lose track of the plot, you're trying to put the story together. But it is in the revision phase that you try to improve your writing, you try to make it presentable, you try to make it good. So one tip I can give you for revision is read your work out loud. Whatever you have written, try to speak it out loudly, because studies show that the human brain process spoken words differently than written words. So when you speak it out loud, you can understand the awkwardness of the sentence, or if the sentence is too wordy, or it doesn't sound, ideal, it's not clear, etc. So these things you can understand better when you read it out loud. And you can ask other people to read your paper. That's actually the best thing to do. And like I said earlier, in pre-writing, it's really good if you give it to people who are not in your specialty, who are not in your field. So what I normally do is, a lot of my writing, I used to give it to my brothers, and they're not doctors. They're far from the medical field. They are chartered accountants and chefs, etc. So they are not doctors, and when they look at your work, they are able to, if they are able to understand people who are not doctors, but people who are, who understand English and are intelligent, and they read your work and they're able to understand your work, then you have done your homework. And like I mentioned earlier, it is really important to declutter, remove the clutter. You have to do the word check. And what I said just now, feedback from others is really important. Now, before I move on, I would request you all to pause for a few seconds and think about how much time you spent in each phase. Where do you spend most time on? Is it the pre-writing phase? Is it the writing the first draft phase, or the revision phase? I want each and every one of you to take a few seconds, think it through, and understand, or think where you spend your most time on. So according to this Stanford School of Medicine scientific writing workshop, they say that this is how the division of your time should be. Ideally speaking, you should be spending most amount of time in pre-writing, surprisingly least amount of time in the second phase, that is writing the first draft, and then revision. 20% of your time is allotted to revision. So this is an ideal situation. A lot of people find the second phase, writing the first draft, tough because they, like I mentioned earlier, they wouldn't have done the pre-writing phase well. So if you have done your pre-writing, if you have denoted 70%, that is bulk of your time to pre-writing, and you're ready, then writing will come very easy. Now, there is a recommended order for writing an original manuscript. Again, I would like to pause. There are a lot of pauses in this session. So I would ask you to pause and think through how you go about writing your original manuscript. How do you start? Where do you start? Do you start with the introduction, or do you start by writing the abstract? How would you start the original manuscript? And look at the recommended order. So it is recommended that you start with writing tables and figures, and then you move on to the results section, and then the methods, materials and methods, then the introduction, discussion, and abstract. Now, tables and figures, this might come as a surprise to you, but tables and figures are the most important part of your manuscript, period. A lot of times, editors and reviewers, it is the tables and figures that they look at, or they look at first. According to the Stanford School of Medicine or other scientific workshops, they say that tables and figures are so important. They form the crux of your manuscript, and all the other writing that you do, your result, method, introduction, etc., every other writing is just window dressing. Can you believe that? So this was something that came as a shock to me too, because I don't think we stress enough on tables and figures, or how important the tables and figures are. Once you get your tables and figures right, the results just falls out of the tables and figures. So the result part gets easy. And then methods, there's nothing to it. It's just a play-by-play of what you did, how you went about collecting your data, doing your analysis, or what you did. So I think methods is the most easy part, where you know what you did and you just need to write it down. Then there is the introduction part. Introduction, again, we are going to, in the later slides, I'm going to talk more on these each step. And then we have the discussion. And lastly, we have the abstract. Abstract means to pull out. So if people write abstract first, that is a wrong practice. You should be writing abstract in the end. Once you're done with everything, once you've completed your discussion, abstract is very easy. You just need to pull out whatever is needed into the abstract, and there you have your abstract. So let's move on to a few tips and tricks of each stage. First, we have the tables and figures. So when I say tables and figures, I don't mean shell tables and figures. I mean professional tables and figures, complete tables and figures. You don't have to make a haphazard table and go on to the next step. No, you have to complete your tables and figures, because I did tell you how important the tables and figures are. So you have to invest time, energy, and thought into your tables and figures. What happens is a lot of scientific writing, especially coming from the Indian subcontinent, we don't pay a lot of attention to tables and figures. It's just thrown here and there for the sake of having a table or a figure. It does not get its due. Tables and figures don't get the importance that it deserves. So you should change that practice, and next time you start writing, you have to pay more attention to the tables and figures. You don't, and because I said tables and figures are so important, that doesn't mean your paper has to be filled with tables and figures. Try to tell the story with minimal tables and figures, but standard tables and figures. Figures, now another point you should remember is what goes into a table and what goes into a figure. So this demarcation you have to make. Figures are more visually appealing. They say that usually trends, etc., are given in figures. And if there is a really important point that you want to stress or you want to showcase, you can put it in a figure. And when you have many variables, many values, it's ideally put into a table. It's really important to give footnotes where necessary. Footnotes are very important. Now, footnotes, there are many ways of writing. People put stars, people put asterisks, people put alphabets like ABC. So it all depends on the journal you are submitting to. Okay, so I forgot to mention another important point. Before you start writing your manuscript, it is ideal to identify the journal you plan to submit it to, which is again not a practice that we all are used to. We finish writing the manuscript, and then we think about which journal to send it to. So before you start writing, it would be better if you can identify the journal, go to the author instructions, because many journals have certain specifications when it comes to their tables and figures or how their footnotes are going to be. Like, you may be confused. Should the variables be in capital letters? Should the first letter of the variable be capitalized? Should I flush towards the right, or should we flush towards the left or the center? And how should the footnote be, etc., etc. So all these questions come to you, and people just do whatever comes, whatever they feel like, but that's wrong. Ideally, you should go to the journal you plan to submit it to. You read the author instructions, or if even easier, you can pull out a published paper, a recently published paper from that journal, and have a look at how they have presented the tables and figures. And this also goes a long way in impressing the editors and the reviewers, because your tables come across professional and it looks exactly like the way the journal wants it to be. And yeah, so again, follow the table format from the journal. And next slide, I'll show you some example of how the table should be. It is said in scientific writing that an ideal table, a good table, should have just 3 horizontal lines. You don't have to have a lot of columns and rows, which looks like grids. That is a very wrong way. So this is how an ideal table should look like. Many places, many high impact factor journals, many reputed journals, they prefer the tables to look like this. And if this is an example that is based on bad witches and good witches, it's a comparison, characteristics between from the Wizard of Oz. So in this, if you look at it, there are certain specifics that I would like to mention. you have to give the units. If you look at the age, they have mentioned years. And if you look at the exercise, it is minute per day. So it is very important that you mention the units. If suppose somebody had written only exercise, it could be minutes per day, it could be hours per day, it could be, or it could be minutes per week or hours per year, it could be anything. So that confuses your reader. Once again, make life easy for your reader. And again, in age, if it were toddlers, it could be months. So, so it's really important that you mention the units. And then another point I would like to stress is here they don't have decimals, but many a times we come across papers which has values in decimals. And what people do is they write 3 or 4 places after the decimal. You don't have to do that. Just because your statistical software spits out so many decimal points, you don't have to copy paste the entire thing into the table. You can stick to 1 or 2 decimal points. So these are a few etiquettes, a few etiquettes of a table or etiquettes of writing that you should be aware of. Now, this is an example of how a table should not look like. If you notice, there are so many grids, and if you think back at the previous table, how it looked like and how neat and readable, and look how this table looks like. So many grid lines are usually frowned upon. So it's better you remove the grid lines when you make a table and just keep it to 3 horizontal lines. And we'll move on to figures. Now, look at this. So this is a comparison. It was reprinted from the New England Journal of Medicine, and it's a comparison of dog and cat bites. So if you look at this figure, it's so nice. How it's so easy for the reader to understand. We can just look and understand where the bites were more. Oh, on the hand. Okay, there's so many bites on the hand, and it's pretty easy. Imagine the same data if it was put in a table. It wouldn't be as interesting or as easy as this. So it's up to you to understand which data ideally goes into a figure and which data goes into a table. Now we move on to the results section. So the few tips and tricks in results section are, it is a lot of times what people do is they repeat everything that's there in the tables and figures again into the results. You have to give your reader some benefit. I mean, you don't expect them to read the same thing that's there in the tables and figures. Why would you want to subject somebody to read the same thing again in results? Results are basically high-level summarization of the values you have given in your tables and figures. And you can give precise values that is not available in the figures. Sometimes in the values are in absolute form, so you can give the percentage forms in result section, so etc. etc. It's really important that result section is not a repetition, a word repetition of your figures and tables. You can complement the information already there, but don't keep repeating the same things. Result section is fairly easy. Once you've got your tables and figures right, like I mentioned earlier, it just falls right out of it. So it shouldn't take a lot of time, and it's better to keep it fairly simple and small. You should not confuse results with your methods, because result section is what you found. It is not what you did or why you did it, because a lot of times if you look at research papers, the authors give reasons for the statistical application used or the statistical method used. They try to describe it, or they try to give reasons for it in the results section, which is wrong, because result just wants to know what you just want the reader to know what you found, and what you did can be explained in the method section. Likewise, do not confuse your result with discussion, because result section is basically about what your data shows. It is not about what your data means. What your data means or describing your data can be done in the discussion section. Now, another confusion that a lot of us have is tense. What is the verb tense that you use? You have to write in past tense, you have to write in present tense, and people get confused and they go between both the tenses. So it's a fairly good tip to remember is when you are talking about things that's already done, like the data collection or the statistical analysis, that's already done when you sit down to write the results, this can be explained in the past tense. You can say the data shows or the analysis showed. So this is in the past tense. When you talk about things that are true to the present, like the table, you're describing the table. The table 3 shows. So that can be in the present tense because it is true even presently. It's not in the past, it is in the present. So you should be able to make that differentiation about what happened in the past and what is true to the present. And based on that, you have to decide the verb tense that you use. We move on to the materials and methods section. Materials and methods is basically the who, what, how, where, and when of your paper. These points have to be explicitly mentioned. You have to give information, you have to give exact information because it's like a recipe. When you go online, you want to cook something and you need the recipe, you expect an exact recipe with measurements and quantities, etc. So likewise, the whole point of materials and methods is so that somebody else can replicate your study in a different setting, in a different population, at a different time, etc. So your materials and methods should be precise, it should be easy, and it should be replicable. You have to use a flow diagram or table where needed. This again does not get its due because we don't use a lot of flow diagrams or tables in the materials and methods. If you can use flow diagrams and tables, it would be very nice. Table can also, it's hardly, you hardly come across a table in a material and method section. You can use a table when there are, for example, you're doing a drug trial and there are different dosages and different groups involved. If you put it nicely and neatly in a table, that looks good. And you can use flow diagrams. Very commonly, you see flow diagrams of participant selection in systematic reviews and meta-analysis, but even other studies, it would be nice if there are flow diagrams showing how you selected the participants and the amount of attrition, etc. You can ideally break up the methods and materials section into smaller subsections, and that makes it easy on the reader. Cite references for commonly used methods. Sometimes there are methods which are common, it's been used over the years, so you don't have to go and explain that method once again in your materials and methods. You can put a citation and people can go back and read up on it if in case they're interested. This is an example where a friend of mine had he'd done a randomized control trial, and his materials and methods section, he had nicely put it into a flow chart, and so it's so much easier to understand. The clarity is so much more than if you had put it in a text format. These are the expected subheadings in the method section. You have to mention the materials used, what are the instruments, etc. Then the participants, the subjects, how you chose the participants, study, sampling, sample size, calculation, etc. All that comes there. And then the experiment, protocol, study design, what study design you used, and then measurement, and then the statistical analysis done. Now we move on to introduction. I would like to mention something that a lot of people don't know, but it is said that typically your introduction should be 3 paragraphs long. Like I mentioned earlier, if you remember, I told you about the pre-writing phase where you keep reading and you keep collecting information. So what happens is you are armed with so much of information. You have a lot going, and you know so much about the topic that you feel you have to write everything that you know into the introduction section. But it doesn't work that way. You have to keep your introduction crisp and short. So typically, ideally, introduction should be only 3 paragraphs long, and these 3 paragraphs should not be really long paragraphs. Keep it short. Most of the journals, they demand or they expect that your introduction should not go beyond 5 paragraphs. That is the maximum limit. So try to stick it within 3 paragraphs. And how you start these 3 paragraphs is you have to move from known to unknown. You have a topic, okay, let's take an example. Let's discuss with relation to the relationship between breast cancer and smoking. So when I talk about this topic, let me give you an example. You don't start your paper with everything you know on smoking. You don't say, because if you Google smoking, you get so much of, information, so many scientific articles on smoking. Or if you search breast cancer, you get so many various articles and material on it. You don't write everything you know. You don't keep talking about smoking. You don't denote an entire paragraph to smoking and everything bad about it, or the risk factors, etc., and breast cancer, everything about breast cancer. You look at articles that shows a relationship between breast cancer and smoking. So your first paragraph will be everything you know about the relationship between breast cancer and smoking. And your second paragraph, you have to talk about unknown, the things that are not known, the loopholes in those studies, or the limitations in those studies, what is not known in those studies. And in the third paragraph, you can explicitly state your research question, aim, or hypothesis. Now, introduction is a very fun section. It's my favorite section to write. If you follow this format, it's very easy to write your introduction. If you keep it to 3 paragraphs, you start with the known information, then you move on to the unknown information, and then you have to mention your research question, aim, hypothesis, etc. It has to. You have to mention you have to end your introduction. It is, explicitly you have to end it with research question, aim, hypothesis, etc. And try not to use too many technical terms. Try to keep the introduction fairly simple. This is how it looks like. It's an inverted cone. So you start from a huge, it's like you start from the background, you put all the known information, and then you mention the gap, and then you mention the hypothesis, etc. And then you also mention the approach or the proposed solution. So you narrow it down. This is the inverted cone. So when you think of writing the introduction, you can have the image of this cone in your head and then start writing. Now we move on to the discussion, the tips and tricks in discussion. Discussion is a little difficult because I think a lot of people find the discussion part difficult because it's longer to write. It has a lot of comparisons in it, and there's something inherently difficult about the discussion part. But if you followed the method which I've mentioned in these slides, where you start with the tables and then you move on to the results and methods, introduction, etc. If you follow that format, discussion becomes fairly easy. Discussion is a chance for you to showcase good writing. How you begin discussion is, if you remember, I told you, you have to end your introduction with your research question. You have to begin your discussion with your main finding, what you found. So you can start with, we found that. So it's really important that you start your discussion with your main finding. And a problem with discussion is many of us, we start writing, we start making the comparisons, we start, comparing with the other studies done. And then we go a little, away from the topic. So it's very important to make sure you don't travel too far away from the data. You have to stick to the data at hand. And then another very, very important point is towards the end, you don't begin with the limitations, but towards the end, you have to mention the limitations in your discussion, because there will obviously be a lot of, plot holes, or there may be some discrepancies in the study, obviously. And it is really important that your reviewer, your editor will definitely find it out. So it is important that you mention them. It goes a long way in increasing confidence in your study. A lot of editors and reviewers say that if they see that the person has written the limitations of the study, they've specifically mentioned the limitations of their study towards the end, it impresses them a whole lot. So it is really important. And by limitation, it's not generic limitations, which is, ideal for every study. It is specific limitations of your study. You have to mention them. You may not find solution to those limitations, but the mere fact that you have understood the limitations and you've mentioned the limitations, it goes a long way in creating an impression with your editors and your reviewers. So this is how the discussion, if you remember, it was an inverted cone in case of the introduction, and it's a cone shape way of writing with your discussion. You start with what you found, it's very narrow, and then from there you go, you make it more broader. So these are the answer the question asked, support your conclusion, defend your conclusion. You have to anticipate criticism and make a mention of it. And then in the end, it is ideal to give a take-home message, and you can nicely wrap it up with the conclusion. And in public health, if there is a public health take on it, or a public health relevance to your study, this is where you can mention that also. Now, abstract, like I mentioned earlier, abstract is to pull out. A common mistake people do is, especially when, during the postgraduate days, when you have conferences or conventions to go to, and then you want to present a paper or a poster, but you have not finished writing your manuscript. What you do is haphazardly you put together an abstract and you send it for selection. So we've all been there. And what happens is, this was a few months before you even started writing your manuscript, and you presented the abstract, it was done, dusted, everything is over. And then after a few months, when you sit down to write your manuscript, you know that you've already written the abstract. You bring that abstract in and you try to revolve the paper around that abstract, because it's normal human tendency. When you've written something already, you feel that is right, that is correct. But that again is very wrong practice. Throw that abstract into the garbage and start afresh. You can, like I mentioned earlier, follow the steps, start with the tables and figures, then move on to the result and methods, introduction, etc. In the end, pull out the abstract from the manuscript that you have written. So that's a very important tip I would like to give you. And ideally, you can highlight, there are two types of abstract. There is structured abstract, there is a simple abstract. So many times journals, they specify what kind of abstract they expect. So you can follow the journal instructions or structured abstracts. Otherwise, if there's no specific instruction given, you can follow a structured format that looks much neater and it's much more easier to read. And abstract, they always have a limited length. You cannot keep writing. It has to be within 100 to 300 words. Sometimes they allow 350 words, but try to keep it within 300 words. And your abstracts are really important, because most often that is the only part people read. Now we move on to another issue. So as writers, when we write, it wouldn't do justice to the topic if I keep talking on and on about the steps in writing and how to have good writing and how to write, etc., etc. And I don't touch upon plagiarism. Now, plagiarism is a very important issue that's faced in the scientific world. It's there everywhere, especially so in the scientific world. And quite a few years ago, there was a lot of limelight on plagiarism, because if you remember, there was a whole scandal where Melania Trump had blatantly plagiarized a 2008 speech given by Michelle Obama. She had completely copied the speech and she'd spoken it as herself. So that had created a lot of furor, and it was a huge scandal, and a lot of light was thrown on plagiarism. So our scientific community is also not immune to plagiarism. There are many issues related to plagiarism. Let's see. What exactly? Many times, a lot of research students, they know plagiarism is wrong, but they don't know what exactly is plagiarism. If they're doing they won't understand what they're doing is wrong. Plagiarism is basically copying and pasting somebody else's sentences or a part of sentence and showcasing it as your own. Plagiarism is copying and pasting somebody else's sentences, rearranging the words and showcasing it as your own. even borrowing material from from websites like Wikipedia, etc., or certain blogs, and copying and pasting it and showcasing as your own is again plagiarism. These days, there are many plagiarism softwares. It's very easy to understand plagiarism. Even not just the softwares, even some sentences which you feel are plagiarized. If you copy and paste it on Google and you press the search button, you can see the sentences. It's there. It easily comes out if it was a sentence taken from another study. So you have to, plagiarism is very much frowned upon, and it you should be very careful. And research say that the possibility of two people stringing together more than 5 words exactly the same way, the probability is very, very rare. So it is a well-known fact, and you cannot get away with plagiarism saying that you also happen to write the same way as the original author actually wrote it. And there is another concept called self-plagiarism. And this is where a lot of people, a lot of people have no idea about self-plagiarism, because self-plagiarism is plagiarizing your own work. Now you might wonder, I wrote it, it's my words, it's my work, why can't I use it everywhere? That is again wrong, because people, what they do is some of their writings, they copy and paste it, and they put it in a lot of their research work. Because for one thing, you are infringing on the copyright policy of the journal that you originally submitted your manuscript to. Because if you remember, when you submit manuscripts, we do sign the copyright form and we give them, permission to own the manuscript, etc. So you are infringing upon that, and also it's wrong. Even your own work, repeating it in different studies and different journals is completely wrong, and it's called as self-plagiarism. So when you, it's easy not to plagiarize. I mean, you can just understand the material well enough. So this is again where the pre-writing phase, which I mentioned earlier, comes into play. If you do a well enough work in your pre-writing phase, you will not need to plagiarize. Then you can work from memory, draw your own conclusions, give your own takes on the topic or the subject, and right away. Now we move on to another testy waters. It's the authorship. So the dilemma of authorship, that is a huge dilemma, in fact. So what happens is a lot of times we approach different people, or we approach different clinicians on, a study. You take the suggestions, or you take the help, or you, whatever. Everybody, approach, it's not necessary that you give an authorship to everyone you approach. You can always mention them in acknowledgement. So authorship should be given only to the people who actually do work on the manuscript. So there are orders to the authorship. It's usually given as a person who found the idea, whose concept it is, who does the most work on it. And there are different ways. So each journal, each journal has different specifications to the order of authorship, and you have a team, so you can come, it's usually decided within the team. People come to a consensus on, how to go about with the order of authorship. And then while talking about authorship, I would also, like I said earlier, there is a whole section called acknowledgement. So whoever helped you with the research and whoever contributed, which you feel it does not, lead to authorship, you can always mention it in the acknowledgement section. Then we move on to the submission process. Before you submit, it is very important, or even before you begin to write your manuscript, you should read the instruction for authors, and then understand the writing that's needed, or the format that's needed, and make your manuscript accordingly. Now, when you submit a manuscript, there are usually 4 outcomes. First outcome is your paper is accepted, which never usually happens. It's very, very rare. And then the other outcome is accepted pending minor revision. So your paper is accepted, but you have to do minor revisions on it. That is also pretty rare. Now, what happens mostly is rejected, but resubmission possible. Now, when you see rejected, you may be disheartened. You may feel, your paper has been rejected, but no, if they say your paper is rejected, but they give a few, reviewer comments, and they say that if you address these comments and submit again to the journal, that is positive. That means they're actually interested in your manuscript, but they want you to make a few changes. So that is a very positive outcome, actually. And most of the time, this is the outcome that warrants a publication. So when you have, and then the fourth outcome is no resubmission possible. So then you have to look at another journal and, make the changes needed, etc., and go on publishing. So before I move on, I would like to say that a lot of times when the reviewer comments are given, you feel disheartened. You don't have to feel disheartened with reviewer comments because they're actually nice. They're actually very useful to you. You should never take it personal. It is not a personal, they're not saying something bad about you as a person. They are trying to make some changes into your study. So sometimes it's not needed. At that time, you need not make the changes, but a lot of times, even if your manuscript is rejected and it is not possible to submit it in the same journal, but if the reviewer comments are given, it's nice if you can address the reviewer comments and make changes, because that only improves your paper. And in case they do give the option of resubmitting, it is ideally you should. Many journals, they expect track changes, so you can make the changes that is needed as suggested by the reviewer. Some additions may be required, you can make the additions, and also you can keep a covering letter where you address the questions asked or the points given by the reviewer. So when you address the reviewers, make sure you don't have a harsh tone. You write it nicely, respectfully, and so sometimes when you don't agree with the reviewer, you can even put that across in a nice way where you don't feel it's necessary, or you don't really need to make that change in your manuscript, etc. So that's the outcomes. Now, it is said that about 60% of reviewer criticism pertain to the quality of the writing or tables and graphs. See, I told you how important tables and figures are. And about 40% pertain to the quality of the scientific work. So that's quite surprising. Writing is hard work. Writing is actually tough. Even professional writers find writing tough. But like I said earlier, it comes with practice, some amount of practice, and a few tips here and there, which I mentioned earlier. It will, make it easier for you. And it's important that another tip I can give you is when you sit down to write, you can give realistic goals. Like you can tell yourself that you're going to write 500 words today. So instead of putting pressure on yourself, like I'll complete the manuscript in 2 days, don't do that. Put realistic goals. Give yourself 400 words for one day. And when you feel more better and you feel more confident that way, and when you sit down to write, sometimes you can do more than 400 words. Maybe you're on a roll and you finish the 400 words in an hour. That time you need not stop. You can keep writing more. So set realistic goals. And like I said earlier, it's not genetic, or it's not something that's inherent. And, you don't have to be a certain way, or you don't have to be a certain person to be good at writing. Everybody is a good writer. Anyone is. All of you are good writers. We all are good writers. You just need to practice a little more and, be a little more confident. Now, this is another issue. Everybody who is in the research field, especially in academic institutes, where there's a lot of pressure to do publications, or as a researcher or as a scientist, there is a lot of pressure on us to publish. And it is this pressure that leads to a lot of the issues that I mentioned in this session, where it leads to poor writing, bad writing, haphazard work, even plagiarism. So a lot of these things revolve around this concept of publish and perish. So before I end the session, I would like to tell the participants that it's not the quantity of work, it's not the quantity of the work that you do that matters, but it is the quality of the work. So don't think that you need to do a lot of publications over a short period of time. Take your time, do good work, do work that you are proud of. So these are some good references that you can read upon. Clinical Chemistry Guide to Scientific Writing, but it's not on chemistry. Everybody can read it, and even doctors can. It's mostly on science. It's around scientific writing. There are not a lot of chemistry terms, etc. in it. And then this book by Mimi Ziegner, Essentials of Writing Biomedical Research Papers, published by McGraw-Hill's Professional. It has a lot of good reviews. I've not been lucky enough to get my hands on this book, but if you can, it'll be good. So this is supposedly a very good book that gives a lot of insight into good writing and improve your scientific writing. So that ends the session. Maybe later today or tomorrow, or later days, if you have any doubts, if you need some more clarification, feel free to mail me. I'll get back to you when I can. Thank you.
All right, so that was a wrap on the session. I think, Farheen, what really is the gist of all that which you've enlightened the audience, there is the art, the science, and then the beauty of scientific writing. So I think these are the lesser known aspects which I'm sure most of our participants were relatively unaware of. Like I said, it's not a sin not to know anything, but then again, we're all in the pursuit of becoming good writers and ensuring the little hurdles. Many of these are just pure ignorance. I mean, it's not like people would not want to learn or not want to evolve. It's just that we've not paid attention. The devil is in the details, as they say, right? So, okay, fine. So let's just open this house up for discussion. Quickly, we have a couple of queries. Please feel free to use the chat box and let us know what are your thoughts on. I think I'd like to invite the teachers as well here to share their thoughts. Postgraduates who are attending this session, any specific details? Okay. We have a query.
There is a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there any place that has holistic dentistry practicing in Jeddah? I have no idea. I'm sorry. I cannot help you there.
Wrong window. Okay, so again, if you really like the session, please let us know in the chat box. And quickly, I think I'd like to invite Dr. Pramod sir from IDA Damgare branch to share his thoughts on that fantastic presentation which Farheen did for us. Yes, Dr. Pramod.
Good evening.
Yes.
Dr. Farheen Taha. This is the first time I'm hearing you. I'm very happy, delighted. Very nicely you presented, very crisp and clearly about all the steps, what is required. As you told initial for the starters, because I am expecting for a BDS students, definitely they should read newspaper as you told, and they should talk in English to increase their word power so that they can write better. So I am very happy, and every heading you told very crisp and clearly. Initially you told about the grammar. I see a lot of papers coming for revision where grammar will be poor. So again, we'll write for revision with the grammar mistakes corrected. So I feel definitely it is a very, very important step. And you told all the steps in writing process very aptly. And I see a lot of people, as you told, they'll start writing first and then they realize the material is lacking. So as you told very rightly, lot of time should be spent for collecting the data and right data, collecting from a proper source. I see a lot of people now collecting material which is available, everything available on Google. So very poor way of collecting a material. So collecting the material from a index journal, peer-reviewed journal, and precisely searching for a topic with the proper keywords would be a better answer for those people. And you told revision, definitely revision, re-revision, again re-revision will make the presentation better. So I'm very happy to hear that. And you told all the order of writing recommendation of writing the script very aptly. definitely most of the people will start with introduction first and then write method and everything they will do. As you told rightly, the tables and results and then methods, then introduction, discussion, abstract. The order is very right. And you gave all the tips and trips for all the each step very aptly. I'm very delighted to join you and look forward for your further more presentations. Okay. Thank you for joining with us. I'm happy to hear you. Very nicely presented. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, Dr. Pramod sir, from ID Davangere. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind words.
Okay. So, any more queries? Because there would be a lot of specific questions in this, Dr. Farid. I'm sure the participants would definitely would get back to you and reach you for these queries in the the smaller details of how do you condense and how do you paraphrase, citing and plagiarism, and how do you oversee. It happens to be a very tedious process. It's just that attention to detail is what is important, and there's nothing really to break your head over it. As you've said it's really simple and quite easily done. All right. So I think we have a comment from Farheen's principal from school. that's really sweet. Okay. Although she looked at it as a teacher, she's very proud of the passion she displayed. Yes, Farah ma'am, I think, would you like to come on and share your thoughts? Please do. Let us know.
Thank you.
So good evening, everyone. Though I am basically a teacher of English and I've taught Farheen English when she was in school, but then I was really proud of how she presented it. Actually, her preparation, it shows her passion and her preparation and so much clarity in her presentation. So I'm really proud of her, and I know that she really wants to do something different, not the regular MD, what a regular MDS does. So I really admire all the activities that she's involved in. I know about her daily activities and her contributions. So this is the first time, I've gotten a chance to see how she presents her ideas. And I'm really happy and I'm really proud. My best wishes to Farheen.
Thank you so much. Means a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. I think right from the teacher itself. Okay. We have a query, Farheen. I think Dr. Shreya wants to know, what is the tense that's supposed to be used while writing the manuscript?
Sorry, what?
The question is, what tense of writing do you use while writing the manuscript?
What tense? Where is the question? I can't see the question.
They wanted to know whether it's in third person.
Okay. So what the question is, what tense to be used? I didn't hear you.
Right.
Yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, the tense, it depends. Something that's done before, like statistical analysis, data collection, because obviously you sit down to write once you've done all that. So when you talk about things that's already done, you can use the past tense. And when you are talking about something that's already there, which is, present, you have to use the present tense. So you have to understand the difference. When you're writing each section, it is the tense that, it's very important to get your tenses right, because you have to make that decision. It's based on the work that you do, and then go ahead and use the apt or the ideal tense.
Okay, thank you so much. Any other queries? Please do let us know here. I think we just wait for a bit. Before that, wrap up the session for today. Just putting it across here. PhD 101 is ongoing, conducting a lot of sessions like this. In fact, we have today we've had scientific writing. Followed by that, we have interesting topics like minimal intervention dentistry, which is going to be coming up next Wednesday. Apart from that, we also do have rendezvous series where we are trying to identify various public health dentists who have sort of flagged out into different fields. And the whole idea is to teach and to learn public health dentistry in altogether an innovative format. We do have a lot of courses for the undergraduates and postgraduates. And we do have regular webinars, which would be trying to bring together all the subject experts from across the country. And that's the whole goal of how we want to take this forward. So please let us know if you need any assistance related to public health industry or research writing or anything related to biostatistics. All of that, we'd be really happy. Please do check out our website as well, phd101.com. And you can also join our learning group by clicking on the link which I've given in the chat box. So you can get slides of the presentation. And we also have customized curated modules for undergraduates and postgraduates according to their academic needs. So that's a wrap on this session. So quickly going on to any other sessions, I think Dr. Ariba wants to ask anything. I think I can just check. No? All right. Okay, fine. So thank you so much, Dr. Farheen, and for doing this. That was really great to have someone, brings back memories from post-graduation. Thank you so much for bringing it there. We've all known Farheen as someone who's really carved her own path and niche and trying to do things in different ways in her own sense and make this happen and definitely possible. We're really, really grateful to you for doing this session. Like I said, I'd like to convey my heartfelt gratitude on behalf of ID Damgare as well as everyone at PhD 101 and from all the students who've joined us here. And thank you so much for making this happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this session. Thank you.
All right. So we'll just wait for any more questions. Please let us know here. We'll just leave in a couple of minutes. Again, like I said, if you want any specific assistance, you can always reach out to Dr. Farheen. You can reach us and then we'll be able to give you more information on that. And like I say, this is a very, very sought after topic because we're looking at scientific articles and manuscript preparation and everything related to your research progress. So we really want you to better your and further your skills and to see to it that you're having the best of the resources from all that we can provide. So as a small token of appreciation, I just want to thank so much Farheen for giving the session for us and for letting this happen. And definitely, like I said, we'll be Dr. Farheen is also working on workshop extensive. If you want to hone your skills on a hands-on workshop, we'd be really happy to have that in future. And we can work this and we can definitely bring it to the best of our students. So thank you so much, Dr. Farheen, once again.
Thank you.
And thank you all participants for joining in. We'll see you soon at the next session of PhD 101. Until then, all of you stay home, stay safe, stay connected, and let's try to make public health dentistry fun and engaging. Thank you so much.
Thank you.